What's going on, guys? Evan Preco here. You are watching the SG1 Sports Big Ten Football channel. In this video, we are going to recap all of the Big Ten games that took place for Week 7. And to start things off, we've got number 16 ranked Michigan at Illinois. Michigan did win this game 42-25. And for Michigan stats, Shea Patterson was 11 of 22 for 194 yards, 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. So he looked good in some aspects, and he struggled in some aspects, particularly with his completion percentage only 50%, and he threw for under 200 yards. Hassan Haskins was their leading rusher. He had 12 carries for 125 yards, averaging 10.4 yards a carry and a touchdown run. And Zach Charbonnet was right behind him rushing-wise as well. He had 18 carries for 116 yards, averaging 6.5 yards a carry and a touchdown himself. Ronnie Bell was their leading receiver. He had 3 receptions for 98 yards, averaging 32.7 yards a catch, but no touchdowns. Michigan ran for 295 yards, and they had 489 total yards of offense. For Illinois, Matt Robinson got the start because of the injury to Brandon Peters last week against the Gophers. He went 16 of 25 for only 192 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Dre Brown was their leading rusher. He had 8 carries for 39 yards, averaging just under 5 yards a carry, and a touchdown run. Josh Miter-Bebe had 5 receptions for 102 yards, averaging 20.4 yards a catch and a touchdown catch. Illinois ran the ball for 64 total yards, and they had 256 total yards of offense. It's a good win for Illinois. It's a good win for Michigan, I think this is their third straight victory ever since the game against Wisconsin. So they're doing good things. They're doing the right things. They started this game fantastically. They ended up taking a 28-0 lead in the second quarter. Illinois scored to make it 28-7 right before halftime. But for Michigan, you're going into the half with a 21-point lead. But Illinois, they really adjusted well at halftime because to start off the second half, they were amazing. They scored 18 straight points to make it 28-25 to make it a 3-point lead for Michigan. But then Michigan ended up pulling away late in the fourth quarter. They scored a touchdown to make it a 10-point lead, and then after a fumble, they scored again to make the score 42-25, and that'd be the final score of the game. So yeah, good win for Michigan. This is kind of how I expected it to be. Illinois has a good offense, and they looked really good in the third quarter, but Michigan's defense looked really good for most of the game, except for the third quarter when they were giving up points. They forced some turnovers, and they looked decently well. So it's a 3-possession win for Michigan for 17 points. It's a good win for them. They're on the right track. They are 5-1 now, and they're going to be playing Penn State at Penn State next week. So that'll be a real gut check for them. And so this is a big win for them, and this game could really decide Jim Harbaugh's future with the Wolverines, because if they lose this game, they've already got 2 conference losses, so it'd be very hard for them to win the East if they don't beat Penn State next week. For Illinois, they fall 2-4. Their offense played well. Their defense gave up a lot of points, especially to a Michigan offense that hadn't played that well in the past few weeks. Same old for Illinois. They're scoring points, but they're giving up too many points. They're now 2-4, and next week they're going to be playing Wisconsin, and it's just looking really tough for them. So we'll see if they find a way to respond. It'll be in Champaign next week, and we'll see if they can, play with some integrity against what looks like a very, very, very good football team right now. And we'll see how they do. And that's all I have to say for that one. Next up on the list, we've got Rutgers at Indiana. And the final score of this game, Indiana blew out Rutgers 35-0. And for the Hoosiers stats, Michael Penix Jr., he played very well on Saturday. He went 20 for 29 for 282 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Stevie Scott III was their leading rusher. He had 12 carries for 164 yards, averaging 13.7 yards a carry, no touchdowns. And Whop Phillier was their leading receiver. He had a great day. He caught 10 passes for 182 yards, averaging 18.2 yards a catch, no touchdowns though. Indiana ran the ball for 260 total yards, and they had 557 total yards of offense. For Rutgers, they really struggled. Johnny Langen was the starting quarterback, and he did not play well. He went 5 of 13 for 1 yard. no touchdowns, no interceptions. Isaiah Pacheco was their leading rusher. He had 14 carries for 44 yards, averaging just over 3 yards a carry, no scores. And Aaron Young was their leading receiver. He had 3 receptions for 4 yards, averaging 1.3 yards a catch, no touchdowns. Rutgers ran the ball for 74 total yards, and they had only 75 total yards of offense. I mean, with those stats, it does not surprise me that Indiana handled the game as well as they did. And this game was all Indiana, really, from right away from the start. The first play of the game, Indiana forced a fumble and returned it for a touchdown. That was the first play of the game. And then they just really, really played well on offense in the first half, the first quarter especially. They ended up scoring 2 more times and made the score 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. And then that would end up being the score at halftime. In the second half, or the third quarter more particularly, they scored 2 more touchdowns to make it 35-0, and that'd be the final score. And one thing about Indiana that I really liked was their receiver, especially Watt Fillier, their receivers really know how to run after the catch. You saw a lot of swing passes where the receivers would catch it near the line of scrimmage, maybe a couple yards past it, and they would just move with the ball. They would just move right upfield. They made the jukes. They broke tackles. They really knew what to do. In the second quarter, they got a little bit sloppy with the ball. They threw an interception and fumbled it. But I mean, you learn from those mistakes, and they're going to happen. But this is a good win for Indiana. This is their first conference win of the year, so it's a big win for them, especially a shutout. For Rutgers, I mean, it's just another game in what is going to be a bad season for them. They've already fired Chris Ash, and they're 0-2 since then, so nothing's really changed. They're still struggling, especially offensively. They're struggling at the quarterback position as well. They do not have a lot of experience with Johnny Langan, or he does not have a lot of experience on the field there. So they're really struggling there. Next week, Rutgers is going to play Minnesota, and Minnesota's on a roll right now. So we're going to see what happens with that. For Indiana, they play Maryland at Maryland, so we'll see how that goes. Those are 2 teams that kind of have a similar season going on right now, Indiana and Maryland. So that could be a good game. That could be a really close game, and we'll see if Indiana can go on the road and win their second straight conference game. But yeah, good win for Maryland. They're now 4-2 on the season. Got their first conference win, so that's good for them. They only need 2 more wins to become bowl eligible, which is something that they got really close to doing the past couple years, but couldn't. So we'll see if they can. Next up, we've got Maryland at Purdue, and the final score of this game, Purdue won 40-14. And for their stats, Jack Plummer started. He played very well. He went 33 of 41 for 420 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. King Duru was their leading rusher. He had 19 carries for 69 yards, averaging 3.6 yards a carry and a touchdown run. And then Bryson Hopkins was their leading receiver. He had 10 receptions for 140 yards, averaging 14 yards a catch, no touchdowns. And David Bell was right behind him. He had 9 receptions for 138 yards, averaging 15.3 yards a catch, and 2 touchdown catches. Purdue ran the ball for 127 total yards, and they had 547 total yards of offense. For Maryland, Terrell Pigram was the starting quarterback. He went 21 of 39 for 218 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He was their leading rusher, however. He had 13 carries for 107 yards, averaging 8.2 yards a carry, and a touchdown run. And then Dante Demas Jr., their big receiver, was their leading receiver. He had 10 receptions for 105 yards, averaging 10.5 yards a catch, no touchdowns. Maryland ran the ball for 185 yards, and they did have 403 total yards of offense. And the way that the game went, in the first quarter, it was all Purdue. They scored 2 times to make it 13-0. They missed an extra point after their first touchdown. And then in the second quarter, Maryland answered with Javon Leak and a 21-yard touchdown run to make it 13-7. Purdue would answer them to make it 20-7. And then it was kind of back and forth for a little bit. Maryland would answer them to make it 20-14. So right before halftime, it looked like that this would actually be quite a bit of a close game. But then Purdue kicked a field goal with about 5 minutes left to make it a 2-possession game. And then they had a pick 6 by Corey Trice to make it 30-14 the score at halftime. So a 16-point lead for them. Still a two-possession game. In the third quarter, J.D. Dellinger hit a field goal to make it 33-14, three-possession game, and then they scored one more time in the fourth to make it 40-14, and that would be the final score of the game. This is a big win for Purdue. This is the type of game that a lot of Purdue fans were expecting to see this year before the injury bug hit. And for them to win a game by 26 points without Elijah Sindelar, without Rondale Moore, and a bunch of others, I think that says a lot about kind of this team's confidence and their focus to kind of just, stay on task, to keep their eyes on the prize, keep their eyes on the goal. And they played very well. Offensively, they played fantastically, especially in the passing game. They played pretty well on defense. They only gave up 14 points and scored a touchdown themselves. This is a big win for Purdue. This is the kind of game that we thought we'd see quite a bit from Purdue this year with Jeff Brom in his third year. We thought we'd see a lot of improvement. We haven't, but there's a reason for that. It's called injuries, and I can't really explain the Nevada game, week 1. That's kind of a mystery, but Purdue played very well, and I think that they can take this game, get a lot of confidence from it when they watch the film, and really maybe build off of it. Next week they play at Iowa in Iowa City, and Iowa has lost 2 straight games. So we'll see if Purdue can build on that, and if they could pull off a big upset in Iowa City. And then after that they play Illinois in West Lafayette. So we'll see what they can do. It's kind of interesting to see how they're due. I'm really high on this team because I know that they have a lot of potential. It's hard when you have as many injuries as they do, but they do have a lot of potential. For Maryland, on the other hand, they're a mystery. It's really, really difficult for me to figure out Maryland because they started the season out so well, but they've struggled. They've gone 1-3 in their last 4 games, and they only have one Big Ten win so far. Let me just check to make sure that's right. They only have 1 conference win. Next week, Maryland will be playing Indiana, so we'll see how that one can go. And since we just recapped Indiana's game a few minutes ago, Indiana's looking pretty good right now too, so that should be a good game. We'll see what happens with that. Maryland's kind of a mystery right now. We'll see what happens with them in the coming weeks. But good win for Purdue. Maryland's got to figure something out because they have not been playing well lately. So we'll see what happens with both teams in the coming weeks. Next up, we've got Michigan State at number 8, Wisconsin. And Wisconsin blew out Michigan State 38-0. For the Badgers stats, Jack Cohn was efficient. He went 18 of 21 for 180 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Jonathan Taylor, of course, was their leading rusher. He had 26 carries for only 80 yards, still averaging 3.1 yards a carry, and 2 touchdown runs as well. Jake Ferguson, their tight end, was their leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 64 yards, averaging 15.5 yards a catch, no touchdowns. Wisconsin ran the ball for 222 total yards, and they had 402 total yards of offense. For Michigan State, they struggled. Brian Lewerke got the start. He went 7 of 16 for 53 yards, no touchdowns and 1 pick, but he was not their leading passer. He got benched, and Rocky Lombardi ended up playing the rest of the game. He went 5 of 14 for 66 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception as well. Tyreek Thompson was their leading rusher. He had 1 carry for 20 yards. And Darrell Stewart Jr., their top receiver, was their leading receiver on Saturday. He had 5 receptions for 59 yards, averaging 11.8 yards a catch, no touchdowns. Michigan State only ran for 30 yards, and they had only 149 total yards of offense. Another big win for Wisconsin. They have just looked fantastic so far this season, and nobody saw this coming, me included. I thought this would be a better year than last year, but they would still have a lot of holes to fix. And they've just played fantastically, even against good teams like Michigan, like really good teams like Michigan. So they've just looked fantastic. Defensively, they're just on fire. They have shut out 4 of their 6 opponents so far. Their only 2 opponents that have scored points against them are Michigan and Northwestern, 2 conference opponents. So, it's just unbelievable. They have given up, I think, a total of 29 points this season. They have given up 29 points through the first 6 games. That is just unbelievable. And one thing that I like to see offensively for them is efficient play from the quarterback. Jack Cohn's not putting up big numbers, but he's getting the job done. He's not throwing interceptions, which is something that we saw Alex Hornibrook do a lot, and he's not throwing a lot of incomplete passes. His completion percentage has been really good. He was 18 of 21. I think that's like around 80 to 85 completion percentage, and that's really, really, really good. So if he can just continue to play well, play efficient, their defense and their running game will really get them going as far as, wins and stuff like that. He just has to keep going the pattern of not, screwing up, because that's what's held Wisconsin back in the last few years is inefficient quarterback play when other parts of the offense and the entire defense were playing well. So as long as he doesn't hold them back, this team can do anything, in my opinion. They really can. They're playing fantastically right now. For Michigan State, this is a bad loss for them, especially because a lot of people thought that this would be an upset game, and they lost by 38 points. Offensively, they got shut out. They're not playing well offensively, which is, when you think of Michigan State the past couple years, that doesn't surprise you. But it's interesting because they've played well offensively in some of their previous games. Like, they put up 40 points against Indiana. Not that Indiana has the greatest defense, but they put up 40 points against Indiana, 31 points on the road at Northwestern, 51 points against Western Michigan. So for them to get shut out like that is not a shocker, but it makes it interesting. They only scored 10 points last week against Ohio State, and Wisconsin does have one of the best defenses in the Big Ten and the country. So it's not surprising that they played well, but I did think that Michigan State's offense would play a little bit better. I'm surprised that they got shut out. I'm not surprised that they didn't play well, but that's just kind of a growing concern that's going to keep happening for Michigan State. Next week they play Penn State. That's in 2 weeks. They play Penn State in 2 weeks. They have a bye coming up, and Penn State's defense has looked really, really good as well. They played really well against Iowa, and I'll get to that here in a couple minutes. But offensively, you're not going to have a lot of opportunities here. You have Illinois. Their defense has not been playing well. But then after that, you have Michigan, and that's another really good defense you're going to be playing. So, it's hard to predict how Michigan State's going to finish the season right now, because they've had a lot of ups and downs so far in the first half of it, and they're not consistent. They've looked good in some games. They've looked really bad in some games. So it's been hard to figure out exactly where Michigan State is at right now. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about them. But a big win for Wisconsin. A bad, pretty stinging loss for Michigan. And yeah, let's get to the next one. All right, now we've got one of the two games that took place on Saturday night, Nebraska at Minnesota. And the final score of this game, Minnesota blew out Nebraska 34-7. And for the Gopher stats, Tanner Morgan, he went 8 of 13 for only 128 yards, a touchdown pass, no interceptions. Rodney Smith had an amazing game. He had 18 carries for 139 yards, averaging 7.7 yards a carry and a touchdown run. And Tyler Johnson had a pretty good day receiving. He had 5 receptions for 109 yards, averaging 21.8 yards a catch, no touchdowns. They ran the ball for 322 yards, and they had 450 total yards of offense. For Nebraska, Noah Vedral got the start at quarterback because Adrian Martinez was injured, and he went 14 of 23 for 135 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He was also their leading rusher. He had 15 carries for 49 yards, averaging 3.3 yards a carry and no touchdowns. J.D. Spielman was their leading receiver. He had 3 receptions for 59 yards, averaging just under 20 yards a catch, no touchdowns. They had 151 total rushing yards and only 299 total yards of offense. And this game was all Minnesota from the start. They ended up going up 7-0, and that was the score at the end of the first quarter. So it was they ended up getting a big lead, but it took a little bit of time. It was 14-0 at halftime, and then they just exploded in the third quarter. They scored 3 touchdowns in the third quarter to make it 34-0, and then Dedrick Mills would score a touchdown run for Nebraska at the start of the fourth quarter. So, but that was just a garbage touchdown. That didn't really matter because Minnesota was already up big, and it was already pretty much known that they would win that game. But this is a Big win for Minnesota. We saw them jump in the rankings to number 20. This is the first time that they've been ranked since 2014. So it's been almost 5 years since they've been in the top 25. So that's a big win for them. And next week they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing Rutgers. So yeah, and that should be a somewhat easy win for them as well. After that, they have Maryland. So I am expecting them to win their next 2 games, go 8-0. So it's looking good for them right now. But then they'll have their test. Penn State will go to Minneapolis, and they will play the Nittany Lions in what I'm actually really looking forward to watching. That should be a good game. And then they have to play at Iowa after that, and then a couple weeks later, they have to play in the Axe game, the Paul Bunyan's Axe game against the Wisconsin Badgers, who are also playing extremely well right now as well. For Nebraska, this one hurts. This one really hurts. There was not a lot of confidence in the fan base because Adrian Martinez was hurt. So they knew that, without him it'd be very hard, but they were not expecting it to be that bad of a loss. One thing I noticed was the footing. Minnesota's players did not fall down very much. Nebraska's players did. And I don't want to say that Nebraska doesn't prepare for the weather because I'm assuming they get very similar weather down there as well as up in Minneapolis. But, I don't know if they didn't have the right cleats or if they just weren't prepared for the snow, but they were just slipping left and right. And their pass defense played well. They gave up only 128 passing yards, but their run defense really struggled. And I'm not saying that Rodney Smith is not a great running back. He's one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. And this is a conference that has a lot of good running backs. But their running defense really struggled. Minnesota's defense played really well. And it was just, I saw a lot of undisciplined play by Nebraska as well. They would have big plays wiped out by penalties. They would turn the ball over after, getting a big play or something like that. Or they'd just have a bunch of sacks that would knock them out of field goal range. So they just flat out did not look good. They've got to bye this upcoming week, and then they play Indiana in Lincoln after that. So we'll see if they can respond and really kind of work on what they need to work on. They need to work on moving the ball, and they need to work on especially running the ball. They really need to work on running the ball better because they have not done that. Yeah, in the past 3 games, and this one, if you're a Nebraska fan, this one's probably going to sting. If in the past 3 games combined, Nebraska has scored 3 total touchdowns combined in the past 3 games. And with an offense that really looked good in the second half of the season last year, I mean, they're taking a step in the wrong direction right now. It's really not looking that good for them right now. They're 4-3. They're 2-2 in Big Ten play. We'll see how they respond, but they still have to play Wisconsin and Iowa this year. So we'll see if they can improve before then, but right now it's just not looking too good for them. And last but not least, we've got the other game that took place on Saturday night, number 10 Penn State at number 17 Iowa. And this was a low-scoring, close game. Penn State won on the road 17-12. And if you're a fan of these Big Ten style football games, then this is the type of game that you really want to watch. For Penn State, Sean Clifford went 12 of 24 for only 117 yards, a touchdown pass, no interceptions. Noah Kane was their leading rusher. He had 22 carries for 102 yards, a 4.6 yard average carry, and a touchdown run. KJ Hamler was their leading receiver. He had 7 receptions for 61 yards, averaging 8.7 yards a catch, and a touchdown. They had 177 total rushing yards, only 294 total yards of offense. For Iowa, Nate Stanley went 25 of 43 for 286 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Brandon Goodson was their leading rusher. He had 8 carries for only 35 yards, averaging 4.5 yards a carry, no touchdowns. And Brandon Smith was their leading receiver. He had 7 receptions for 86 yards, averaging 12.3 yards a catch, and a touchdown catch. So that was a really cool-looking acrobatic Randy Moss type of catch. They had 70 total rushing yards and 356 total yards of offense. So even though Iowa lost, they out-yarded Penn State. And Penn State has a good offense. For this game, it started out pretty slow. Iowa took the lead first by kicking a field goal. So the end of the score at the end of the first quarter was 3-0 Iowa. Penn State then scored with KJ Hamler to make the score 7-3, and Iowa would tag on another field goal right before halftime. The halftime score was 7-6 Penn State. Penn State would kick a field goal in the third quarter to make it 10-6, and then they would score a touchdown to kind of put the game away, but not really, to get themselves a safe lead with about 5 minutes left to make it 17-6. And then Iowa would score not a garbage touchdown, but a touchdown to make it close with about 2.5 to go to make it 17-12, but they would not end up getting the ball back. So Penn State walked out of there with the W. Good win for Penn State. They've looked really, really good. They're one of the elite teams in the Big Ten. And going on the road, going to Kinnick Stadium and winning, especially, in those primetime night games, not easy at all. We've seen it in the past. We saw Michigan lose. We saw Ohio State lose. We saw Penn State almost lose 2 years ago. And I really mean almost lose. They won on the final play of the game. So Iowa at home, especially at night, they play really well. So it's very big for Penn State to get that win. A road win by itself, especially a conference road win, is big enough. But to beat Iowa on the road, that's a big accomplishment by them. And I think it shows how good of a football team they are. For Iowa, things aren't looking too good right now. They had a good start to the year, but they've lost their last two. Now, granted, the two games that they lost were at Michigan and against Penn State, two very good football teams. But at the same time, it's just kind of like you see this every year. Iowa wins games, and people think, oh, they're starting to be really good. And then comes the games against Wisconsin, against Penn State. We saw it last year against Penn State as well. Against teams like Michigan, where they just cannot get over the hump. They're good enough to compete, but they just can't get that over the hump win to really put themselves as one of the elite Big Ten teams. They get so close a lot of years, and then it just doesn't work out. And I don't know if they're going to continue to play well against other good teams this year. They've got Purdue next week, and then they play at Northwestern, and that should not be a hard game. But then they have to play in Madison against a Wisconsin team that's playing very well right now. So we'll see. That's another hump game right there. So we'll see about that. Then they play Minnesota, a good team right now. And then they have to play at Nebraska. Nebraska's struggling, but still, it's at Nebraska, and it's the Black Friday game. So we'll see how they continue to do throughout the rest of the year. Penn State got a lot of good games coming up. Next week, they're going to be playing Michigan in Happy Valley in State College, and that should be a really good game as well. Then they have to play at Michigan State, and then they have to play at Minnesota, and then they have to play Indiana, then at Penn State as well. At Ohio State as well. So that there are a lot of good teams that they have to play throughout the rest of the year, and I think it's not going to be easy for them. But they've played well so far, so I'm optimistic that they can win some of these games and possibly win all of them. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's a very slim chance. But I think that there are going to be a lot of good football teams, a lot of good football games that Penn State's going to be playing in the upcoming weeks. And as far as the games go, that's all I've got. So yeah, that's all I've got for the games this week. Ohio State and Northwestern were on byes, so they did not play. And there's one more thing I want to talk about before I sign off. It was hard for me to kind of understand and group the Big Ten teams and kind of understand how they were compared to other teams in the NCAA. And that happens throughout the first half of the season. But I think since we're halfway done with the season now, I think that it was necessary to kind of group teams into different groups in the Big Ten and see kind of which teams are good, which ones are not good, and which ones are like the decent teams. Just kind of get an identity of which teams we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks and what to expect. So I've made 4 different groups for the Big Ten teams. There are the elite, and these are the teams that are really good, that are going to compete for a Big Ten championship, that are basically probably going to win their division and possibly win the Big Ten. And then we have the contenders, and these are the teams that are good but haven't proven themselves to be great. They haven't, separated themselves from everyone else yet. They haven't won the big game yet. They're good, but we don't know if they're, top of the Big Ten material yet. And then we have the middle of the pack, and these are the teams that have winning records, but at the same time are kind of, decent to mediocre. They've lost some games. They're all right, but they're not great. They're not that good, but they're not bad. And then we have the bottom of the conference, which are the bad teams, the teams that are just having bad seasons and losing a lot of games and winning very few games. So to start things off, we're going to go with the elite, and these are not in any particular order, but my elite teams are Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Penn State. All these teams are undefeated this season, and all these teams look very, very good right now. And then we have the contenders, and that is Michigan, Iowa, and Minnesota. Minnesota's undefeated. Michigan is 5-1, 3-1 in Big Ten play, and Iowa is 4-2, 1-2 in Big Ten play. But they've proven they can win games. It's just they haven't won the big ones yet. They've had to play 2 very tough games, and they lost both of them. So I still think they're contenders. They just haven't proven themselves yet. And then the middle of the pack teams are Michigan State. They're 4-3, 2-2 in conference play. Nebraska 4-3, 2-2 in conference play. Indiana, they're 4-2 and 1-2 in conference play. And then Maryland, 3-3, 1-2 in conference play. Now, yes, Maryland has gone 1-3 in their last 4 games, but still, because of the way they started the season, I'm not going to say that they're a bad team because they have shown potential. So I have them in the middle of the pack, but it was not easy to put them there. And I think a lot of people will agree with me on that. And then the bottom of the conference teams, you have Illinois, they're 2-4, winless in Big Ten play, 0-3. Purdue, 2-4, they're 1-2 in Big Ten play. Northwestern, 1-4, 0-3 in Big Ten play. And then Rutgers, they are 1-5 and 0-4 in Big Ten play. So so that's kind of where I've grouped these teams right now, just to kind of get an idea of which teams to be looking for in, competing for the championship game and a possible college football playoff appearance. And then to see which teams are just not good, and then to kind of figure out where all these teams are at right now, to kind of give them an identity. So that's why I did that, and I'll do it every week as well, just to update it. That's all I've got in this video for today. Let me know what you guys think about all these teams. Excuse me. Let me know what you guys think about all the games that took place this weekend, past games coming up. Let me know what you think about the way I grouped the teams. I'm very interested to see what you guys say, and I'll definitely read all of your comments. I would really appreciate it. But thank you guys all for watching. If you could please leave a like on this video, we would all appreciate it. If you could subscribe to our channel as well, and subscribe to our main SG1 Sports channel as well, that would be great. I thank all of you so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a great day.